Believe it or not, this is not going to be a slander on the education system video. It simply is just observations that I have seen. Now I've read literally over 80 books. Like, I've read 80 books this year. From Robert Cialdini to Donald Trump, Elon Musk, Steve Jobs, a lot of Walter Isaacson's reads, Malcolm Gladwell, Angela Duckworth, Robert Greene, Stephen Bartlett, Dale Carnegie, Tony Robbins. Read the book Creature from Jekyll Island, which talks about like the current financial system in the UK and USA, and credit and debt. Like, I'm not here to say I've arrived. I feel like the more I read, the more I realise I need to read, right? Like, I've read 80 books. My goal this year was 100, so I'm definitely going to do that this year. But on my, like, to-read list, I literally have, like, maybe 200 books right now. But every time I read a book, there's always, like, recommendations. And so the list is constantly building, right? There's literally, I just want to go away somewhere and just read, like, back to back to back. Like, I want to read a book a day. I can't do that right now because I'm a little bit busy, but that's what I want to do. I want to just read non-stop and just increase my awareness. You're probably wondering, why read? Because I was at this purgatory period as well, where it's like, everybody knows deep down that they need to know more. Like, even if it's not in your conscious awareness, you know deep down that you need to learn, and you probably shouldn't be not reading. And I had this feeling a lot as well. I mean, to be honest, I was a lost cause when I was 16 because I didn't feel like I needed to learn anything. But when I left school, I was just so done with the idea of learning. I was just like, nah, like, I'm done. I'm not learning any more stuff. But anyway, I got to a point where I was like, I'm just going to commit to this. I'm just going to learn and see what happens. Because even when at the start of the year I wrote down that I wanted to read 100 books, a part in my head was like, why? Like, you don't need to read 100 books. You don't need to read. Like, what are you reading for? There's no need to read. You know enough, and blah blah blah. And you know, that voice was still there, but I was like, you know what, no, I'm going to read 100 books. I'm going to do it anyway. So I'm doing that to increase my awareness, because in business, the topic of my channel is about business. So in business, you can't really afford to not know what you don't know. So my attempts here is to read vast amounts of information, consume loads of information, loads of different perspectives and worldviews and different points in history, so I can form a full picture of what, like, civilization has been from the dawn of time up to now, from all the different aspects of, like, the different industries, whether that be science, psychology, maths, business, economics, sales, like whatever, like every single industry, right? To form this really vast worldview, what helps me make decisions and makes me just be aware of a lot of different things, what's going on in the world, because it's crazy how much your perspective can literally alter your reality. Like, going back to when I was 16 years old. Because the thing is, when you go about your life, Stephen Bartlett talks about this in his book, I think it's Diary of a CEO. He talks about this idea that, like the idea of what you don't know. So when you don't know something, you feel like you know anyway, because you can't just have gaps in your thinking. Because, you know, if we had gaps in our thinking based on how much we know relative to how much information there is in the world, all of us wouldn't be able to function, because there'd just be so much gaps in our thinking. You know what I mean? So naturally, as humans, we fill our mind. So we feel like we've got a complete picture of the world, if you know what I mean. Everybody feels like their worldview is right and correct. You know what I mean? This is literally why the more you know and the smarter you get, the more you realize you don't actually know so much. This is why a lot of smart people, they just seem unsure of themselves, and they don't really know, because they understand that their worldview is broader. Like, wait, there's actually a lot out there. There's a lot of smart people. There's a lot of good-looking people. There's a lot of information out there. There's industries which I don't speak the language of. Like, I don't know what engineers talk about day to day. I don't know what plumbers or doctors or lawyers talk about day to day. But as a businessman, I need to be able to speak the language of all these different industries, because they play into business. I just read a book by Donald Trump and Robert Kiyosaki, which is actually, I think, one of my favorite books this year so far. The frameworks and the mental models and the thoroughness of that book is just insane, to say it's only 7 hours long. He talks about this framework in the book. There's like 8 tiers to running a business, and the reason why 95% of businesses fail is because somebody will start business, say for example a cook. They think, I'm passionate for cooking, so I'm going to start my own business about cooking. But what they don't realize is business isn't just about doing their passion. There's loads of other different industries, micro industries inside a business that they need to know the language about, and they need to know how to speak, delegate, or at least do in the short term until you can afford to hire somebody else. You've got product marketing, distribution, sales, operations, accounting. Then you've got the he talks about this idea, there's 8 tiers to a successful relationship. So you've got the legal part, which is like accounting and stuff. You've got communications, which is like communicating with your team and stuff like that. You've got operations. Like there's different parts there. I don't remember off the top of my head. I'd have to like write it down to say. And then you've got the 3 outsides, which is like team, mission, and leadership. Which I don't want to go too deep. So, in fact, I'm going to mention it. There's a mental model in this book, what Midas Touch by Donald Trump and Robert Kiyosaki. It's the cash flow quadrant. So if you've read that book, you know about this framework. I'm pretty sure these guys mention it a lot across all their different books. In Robert's more so because it's Robert's frameworks. And then in the collaboration book. So if you've read any of the Donald Trump and Robert Kiyosaki collaborations, you know what I'm talking about. He talks about this idea of a cash flow quadrant. There's 4 tiers. You've got the employee, you've got the self-employed, you've got the business, and then you've got the investor. And essentially he's saying the self-employed person, so like, you know, a specialized person, somebody who owns a dental practice, for example, and the person who like owns McDonald's, right? It's 2 completely different tiers. I'm going off topic, so I'm bringing it back because I'm making these videos shorter. Rather than making these 26 videos, I just want to make a 10-minute video that's so compact you can't help but watch it. I'm going back to it. So school, I just remember being back at school when I was 16, when everybody was like, oh, I'm going to do this for a career, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do this. I was just there because I actually had no idea what I wanted to do. I had no idea who I was as a person. I think it's crazy how at school, maybe there is a class and I just didn't pay attention, right? There's this idea that like all the people that bash school about all the lacks of what they teach at school is just because they weren't paying attention. So maybe that was the case for me. But as far as I'm aware, they don't teach you how to be self-aware at school, and they don't teach you about psychology or anything to do with like, you know, what your relationship with yourself. So when I was 16, I knew nothing about myself, and this felt like a problem to me. I literally remember thinking like, everybody around me seems to know themselves so well, but I just don't have a grip on who I am at all. Like I have no grasp of who I am. I don't know anything about myself. And then they expect me to then go and decide what I want to do for a job for the rest of my life. I just couldn't grasp my head around it. Like you know what I mean? I just couldn't grasp the idea of picking a career or a job. Because in my head, working a job wasn't an option. I was a little bit delusional growing up, and the way I was brought up was like, it was just strange. But a job wasn't an option for me. That doesn't mean that back then I thought I was going to become an entrepreneur. I thought I was going to become a famous model because I was modeling back then. So I thought, okay, I'm just going to make millions modeling, and that's just going to sort itself out. So I wasn't really considering a career. And you know, a career isn't bad, right? When it comes down to this idea of entrepreneurship, it's definitely been glamorized in recent times. Not everybody can be an entrepreneur. It literally doesn't make sense. Like, there's just so much to entrepreneurship. Most people, like anybody could become an entrepreneur, but I don't think it's beneficial for most people too. We need the specialists. We need the accountants, the lawyers, the doctors, the engineers, the plumbers, the architects. We need those. Without those, there is no business. You know what I mean? A business owner or an entrepreneur's job is to hire the specialists and orchestrate them so they can work as a team and produce like a grandiose result. So, you know, we need all different tiers of society. So I'm not going to sit here and bash the people who had careers. Like, I think people back then, like, people have been brought up with a more realistic worldview. So by the time most people are 16, they know what they wanted out of life. Do you know what I mean? I think with me, and there's this idea of ADHD where they say ADHD brain's like 3 years underdeveloped. So with that logic, at 16 I was 13. Because to be honest, with that, adding to that logic, it's like around 90 when I started to understand my place in this world a little bit. Like, my worldview was a lot more developed at 19. I feel like at 19 I should have been where I was. I feel like 19 I should have been where I was at 16, if you know what I mean. But it's just crazy how there's so much I'm learning reading all the books I'm reading now, and it just makes me think like, why is nobody talking about this at a masses level? Like, nobody's talking about this idea of self-awareness. Or in Peter Drucker's book, in Managing Oneself, it mentions a lot about this idea of like, how do you learn? Because even now in present tense at 23 years old, I actually don't really know how I learn. So my goal or my approach when it comes to learning is just to hit every single angle. So I'm not missing any. You know what I mean? It's this idea of like retention of information when it comes to certain mediums, whether you be reading, that's like one form of retention. Then hearing's one form of retention, so you can read and hear a book, which is what I do with a Kindle and audiobook sync, and that helps you theoretically retain twice as much information. There's this idea of teaching, which is a way of retaining information. There's doing, which is like probably the best way to do it. So there's lots of different ways to retain information. So my goal is to just do everything, right? Do every form of retention possible when it comes to learning. And then writing as well. Peter Drucker talks about a lot. He says himself, he learns best by writing. And then apparently Winston Churchill learned a lot by writing, right? Obviously a historical figure. And I think that's true for me. Like when I'm writing, I've always loved writing, right? So when I was younger, I used to write like really, really well. Like my English skills were really well growing up. And even now, like I really do enjoy writing. Like I write book reviews for every book I read, and some of them are just 3-4 pages long. It's like when I'm sat down with pen to paper, it's like that's when my mind can completely flourish. It's when I have complete access to like all of my information, if you like. This is why in the future I want to write books and different stuff like that, because I just feel like writing comes so naturally to me. Or should I shouldn't say it comes natural to me. It's something that I've had a lot of practice in throughout the years. I literally just remember writing loads when I was younger. It's just crazy how no one's talking about how you learn or how you should learn. I guess it's not really much of a topic because people aren't really learning much in general. Like at best, people are learning their specialized subject. So maybe an accountant is learning accounting skills, but really outside of that, he's not learning too much. But my job as an entrepreneur is to be a generalist, not a specialist. So I need to know a lot about a whole bunch of different things, which ADHD plays into this like perfectly, right? Because I'm constantly seeking novelty in a sense, and I love the idea of learning about a whole bunch of different things. They call it like a renaissance man, somebody who knows a little bit about everything. I think that sums up me in a nutshell. Like, I've just got little mental models for all sorts of different things, and from all sorts of different industries. And I think that's the best way to think. I think Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's business partner, who's literally, before he died at 99 years old, was a billionaire. Obviously, Warren Buffett's worth 100 billion. And Warren Buffett said he was the smartest man alive or something like that, right? And he emphasizes this point where he's like, he says himself, because he's quite modest, right, that he can't outthink he can outthink people who are on paper way smarter than he is, just because when he's thinking and making decisions, he's referring to several different industries as opposed to the person who's just specialized, like the PhD doctor who's just referring to his experience in the medical field. Charlie Munger will be referring to psychology, will be referring to science, referring to maths, business. He's referring to all these kinds of different things, and he's getting answers from loads of different industries, so he can outthink the person. He can outthink the PhD, even though technically he's smarter and probably more intellectual. I read a book, The Shallows by Nicholas Carr, and then another good book as well is The Distraction Addiction. And then you've got Deep Work by Newport. These are all good books, but I'm talking specifically about the book The Shallows by Nicholas Carr. In that book, he talks about this idea where, like, to learn something and really learn it, internalize it, and have it like change the cells in your body, so you can actually like to properly learn something, learn a new subject. You need to be at it constantly, but not only constantly, you need to be at it with a singular point of focus. So, like, say I'm going to read a book on a certain topic, but I'm only reading that book, I'm not distracted, I'm reading that book, and then say I'm writing that book out again. So I'm hitting the subject with individual focus from multiple of the different retention points. Like they call it deep working versus like shallow working, which is what a lot of people do these days. Say you've got all these YouTube videos where it's like how to get more Instagram followers, or like I read 50 books so you don't have to, or just dumb stuff like that. And you can get all these flashes of information, or like the short form content era now with reels and stuff. You can get loads of different information, but you're not retaining it on a deep level like how you should. You don't have these different reference points, what you need from the extensive research, what you get from rarely going deep on a topic. You don't get that. You just have this shallow flashes of information which don't really help with anything, and that's becoming really common now. And it's like the idea of mastery. Malcolm Gladwell talks about this a ton in the book Outliers. Syed talks about this a lot in the book Bounce. Mastery is apparently it takes around 10,000 hours to master something. So when you see anybody in any field who's mastered something, usually celebrities, whether it be artists, Mozart, like a historical example, whether you got the Serena and Venus Williams, so tennis, sports, anytime anybody's mastered something, it's because they've been given a unique opportunity, practice, and put hours in more than anybody else. So it's just the extent to which somebody practices, the extent to which they have mastery in a field. But like, it's a certain kind of practice, they call it deliberate practice, where it's like you've had time to really go deep on this subject and like deep learn when it comes to that thing, or deep practice or deliberate practice. You know, to develop skills, this is what you need to do. And skills are so important when it comes to navigating this world. Like if you want to be an entrepreneur like me, I'm identifying myself as an entrepreneur now. If you want to be an entrepreneur, you need to acquire a lot of different skills, because you at your baseline doesn't have what it takes to successfully be an entrepreneur. You need to learn all sorts of different things. You need to learn leadership, which I'm still, like, I haven't even had the chance to experience what it is like to lead yet, because my business isn't up and running yet to an extent to where I can exercise leadership, if you like. You've got to learn a little bit about accounting, you've got to know about marketing, distributions, you've got to learn about sales. There's loads of different stuff when it comes to sales in itself. You've got appointment setting, you've got closing sales, the psychology of sales, negotiations, you've got supply chain, all sorts of different stuff when it comes to business. And these are all skills that I need to know. I can't afford not to know. I've got to learn skills across multiple different softwares, whether it be instantly doing email campaigns. I've got to learn about paid advertisement across all the different platforms, Facebook ads, Google ads, all the different things like that. And obviously you don't do this all at once. Like, Rome wasn't built in a day, is a classical saying. Like, it takes a lot of time to build these habits, but I've really got to be at it. And you really got to be at it if you're going to stand a chance in entrepreneurship, and you've got to know what to expect. And then, like, the best way to learn as well is experience. So theoretical learning is great or whatever else, but the best way you're going to learn is when you really just go at something. You know deep down you don't know everything it is to know. You don't know everything there is to know about this subject, but you're going to tackle it anyway. And when problems arise, what you then do is, because you're now problem aware, you can then take this problem, isolate it, learn how to tackle that problem individually, and iterate. So you move forward. You know you don't know everything. You encounter a problem. You isolate that problem. You solve that problem. You move on. But what happens is you keep moving forward, and through this experience, that's the best way to learn something. And this is why mentors are so important as well, because you get to access somebody who's already been there. So when you encounter these problems, rather than staying stuck for ages, right, you have this mentor to guide you along and to teach you the mental models and teach you the principles that you need to know. And this is me admitting that I'm going to go and get a mentor when it comes to business, because all the great business people in the modern era right now on YouTube had mentors, whether it be going back a generation, Ty Lopez had a mentor, Grant Cardone had a mentor, Iman Gadzi had a mentor, Charlie Morgan had a mentor. Like, you can't become a successful business person without mentorship. Alex Hormozy had mentors, Tony Robbins had mentors. Like, honestly, you can't do it without mentorship. So this is something I've decided to do. I'm just going to go and get a mentor when it comes to agency, because there's just too many different systems and operations that I'm just not going to be able to juggle or learn about. Like, I could learn about it on my own and really break things down and just go at it individually, but it's going to take ages, right? So I guess you could do it, but it's just going to take a long damn time. This is the idea of mentors. A classical thing as well is this dichotomy, if you like, between emotional intelligence and intellectual intelligence. Right brain emotional intelligence, left brain intellectual intelligence, because they're two different things. And most people, they go through this like erroneous thinking and erroneous pursuit towards intellect under the false assumption that that's going to solve their whole life. This is why you got super smart people, some of which aren't even successful, because it takes a lot more than just intellect alone to be super smart, to be super successful. Like, emotional intelligence is more important, rarely, if you like, because with emotional intelligence, so persistence, grit, learn how to deal with negative emotions, pushing on, like keeping going, like that grittiness, that's all emotional intelligence. And they say the only way you can quit is if you give up. So that emotional intelligence guy is never going to quit. He's just going to keep going until he figures it out. And then when he's at a certain point, you can just hire people, the intellectual people, to like actualize his vision, if you like. This intellectual person, maybe they're so smart they end up just quitting because they're like, this doesn't make logical intellectual sense for me to continue pursuing this path. So I am going to intellectually decide to quit. You know what I mean? That's a funny one. Plus, also, like, who doesn't want to be smart? I think I guess when I was younger, there's this idea of like being a nerd and stuff. So I kind of used to buy into that false dogma where like, oh, he's a nerd. So it's ridiculous, right? Being at school, we kind of glorify being dumb, if you like. The guy who's good looking, who's a little bit slow, like, we want to be like him, which is ridiculous. But I very quickly got over that false belief, and I got to a point where it's like, when you look at somebody and they're smart, you look at that, you can't help but, as a man, as a competitive being, you can't help but look at that and be like, man, I want to be a little bit like that. I want to get a little bit smarter. You know what I mean? Like, I want that. I want the intellect. Like, when I think of smart, I don't think of somebody who's really specialized and like, they know loads about doctoring, for example. I think of somebody who's got a really, like, my definition of smart is somebody who's got a very broad worldview. So they know a lot about the intricacies of the world. They know a little bit about lots of different industries. They know how to speak the language of loads of different industries. They've got loads of stories and mental models and frameworks in their mind that they use to make effective decisions. Just somebody who's like wise. You know, when you the idea of the mentee and the master, that the apprentice thing, where the apprentice looks to the master, like the Karate Kid, Mr. Miyagi, like somebody who you look at as this pinnacle who's already been there, and he has the mental models and he's just willing to distill them upon you. That's what I think of when I think of somebody who's smart, right? And you know, I just want to be surrounded by smart people and wise people who've already been there, right? Like, that's what I think of when I think of as smart, not somebody who did well academically, because I didn't, and most people who I'd consider smart didn't do well academically. I did plan to give this video a little bit more structure, but I feel like I've kind of just gone everywhere, if you like. But there's some good points here, and I'm going to try and bring them home with the editing. So hopefully I can pull that off. I hope you enjoyed this video. I was actually feeling quite tired. I was like, because I've said to myself I'm going to post every single week no matter what. And for this week, I was just like, specifically, I don't really want to post. And I wasn't feeling up to it. Like, I've just spent the day at the library working, because that's where I go for like my deep work, so I can not be distracted and I'm not at home. So I just did like 7 hours of work on the business at the library. I've come back on the train. I've just wrote my book review, because my book reviews take like 30 minutes to write. I wrote that a while back now, because obviously I've been talking for a while. I said to myself, I don't feel like doing this video, but I was like, you know what, I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to push through. I'm going to use that emotional intelligence of mine and get some of that storage out and just extrude it into executing this video. I was wondering what that was. So yeah, I've done the video. I'm feeling well accomplished, and I hope you enjoy this conversation. I hope you've enjoyed this conversation we've had regarding education. And like I said, I weren't going to slander the education system. I didn't, right? Because you got to think, like, all of that really good education, like what the upper class, if you like, have, this is for a reason, you know. Like, they're giving that, they're reserving that education for private schools and the smarter people, because the masses of people aren't meant to have this level of information. And at this point, they don't even want that information. Like, you ask somebody, like you ask a mass mind person, they don't even want the information. They already feel like they know everything. So they've done that very meticulously. They've done that on purpose. They've nurtured a generation of people purposely, so they don't have this information, so they can go and work. They're teaching people how to be workers. All these subconscious rules throughout school, the punctuality, having people think small, choose a career. The whole academic system is designed for people to be workers, which is fine. Like I said, we need workers in society, but if you're wanting more than life and you want to like get free and experience true financial freedom, not be screwed by taxes, and you want financial abundance and everything what comes with that, because finances is the key cornerstone of life. If you want all of that, you're gonna need to get smarter. I think if you're watching a video like this, you already understand that, right? You already understand that. You're a smart guy. I'm saying this and I'm emphasizing it though, because I didn't understand that at 16. I always drill back to when I was 16, because I could have pulled it off. Like, I was smart enough to have made the decision to like start this process when I was 16. I could have done it, but I didn't, right? And I don't want people to make that mistake. I don't want the person who's a thoroughbred, born to be an entrepreneur, wasting time because of wrong thinking. First step to thinking clearly and thinking accurately is to evaluate what you think you know about the past. What do you know about the past? What mental models are you drawing from the past in present tense? What mental models in the past are affecting how you think in the present? Like, I'm constantly seeking approval from other people. So when I'm going out, I'm just thinking like, how can I get people to see me as more than? How can I get people to see me as this influence, to see me as this cool person? And that kind of feeds into like materialism and like trying to prove myself and things like that. But I don't need to do any of that. I grew up kind of outcasted growing up, but that's not present tense. And if I just change my focus from that to just, if I want attention from people and I want affection and approval, admiration, I must first give that rather than going out into the world trying to take from other people. How can I give to other, because everybody's in their own head, right? So how can I go to them and make them feel good? Because through doing that, they are going to naturally approve of me. It's just, I don't know.